So, for homework tonight, I thought for sure I had done this, and I was so good. I had all my prep work done by Monday night. No. So, for your homework, these I'm going to drag into their respective folders. So I'm trying to archive, or not archive, but put in folders anything that's older, so you guys don't get mixed up. And then anything that is outside the folder is what's due that week. Make sense? So this is outside the folder, and we're going to publish it so you guys can see it. So this week you're only going to have one assignment, but I only put one assignment in here because I expect this assignment to take you double the time a normal assignment would take, because this is your first pass at the first 4 pages of your type specimen, okay? You're going to be setting up the file in Illustrator. That's going to take you a little bit of time depending on how much experience you have. You're going to start designing, and here's a good place where you might want to bring in multiple variations, right? So, some of you haven't committed to anything yet. You might, you don't have to make those decisions by yourself. That's why you have a classroom filled with people. So I expect you guys to have some variations. I expect you to be designing with real content here. No fake lorem ipsums, bacon ipsums, hipster ipsums, cupcake ipsums. And I've linked to all of those so you can use them on future projects. Actually use real content. Now, the exception for this is if you're using some sort of stock images and you need to purchase them, pop the comp in, and let's decide together if it's something that's worth purchasing, right? That's where the exception would be.
Do we write the content ourselves, or can we take it?
You can yank it. Yeah.
I mean, the content.
The written content, yeah.
I mean, I have my research, but I just didn't really feel like writing it.
That's fair.
You can take, if they have some history, a little snippet.
Yeah, I mean, make sure it flows together and feels good, but yeah, I don't care if you yank. I mean, I probably should, but I'd rather have you focus on design than creating content.
If I had to write it, I probably want a copyright.
To do it, exactly. Yeah, that's fair. So also make sure you remember your concept. So I want to see 4 pages that feel fairly cohesive, feel good. And this is really designed to get you into a place where you're set up for success for your specimen, okay? So, like I said, this is going to take you a little bit of time.
So are we not having a discussion this week?
Oh, we're having a discussion this week, please. So, for discussion this week, and this is one of my favorites, it's all about variety versus, should be quantity versus quality. Clearly I'm losing it, so let me edit this now. Quantity versus quality. That's more like it, Rachel. Okay, so background here, depending on which designer you're talking to. There are some designers who believe, I should say, that there are only a few typefaces worth ever using, and you should never deviate from those, and if you do, you're a bad designer. There are other designers, master designers, who believe that you can use any typeface, and that's all about creative freedom, and lovey-doveys, and unicorns, and puppy dogs, and rainbows, and it's all about just being open, right? So I'm going to hold all of my opinions on this because I think you guys need to form your own point of view. And it is important, I think, as a designer to have a point of view and to start formulating that nowish, right? So I have attached 2 sides of the same, 2 different sides of the same argument. One is Massimo Vignelli, who is an amazing master designer. He just passed away this past year. There's an article on him in Fast Moving. The Sun had asked for anyone who had been touched by Massimo's work to write him letters on his deathbed. So he got to read all these really beautiful letters. And the college I went to actually has his entire archives. So I've there's actually a Vignelli Center at the college I went to. It wasn't there when I went there, but it was like they were funding it at that point because the chair of the graphic design program was like really close friends with Lella and Massimo and vacationed with them in the south of France. Fabulous life, right? So I have pulled out the excerpt from the Vignelli canon about typefaces. So Vignelli's canon is all about his sort of beliefs about design and how he designs. So he is very much a man who believes you should really only have 6 typefaces, and anything beyond that's just nonsense. And then I've pulled out an article by Michael Beirut, who's also a great master designer. He studied under Paul Scheer. He's also worked with Massimo Vignelli. And he's written this really great article called 13 Ways of Looking at a Typeface. And it sort of talks about his experience of going between quantity and quality. And then you're going to write your opinion. What do you believe as far as, variety versus quality? Like, what's more important? Do you have a favorite set of typefaces that you use? Do you use different typefaces at any given time? What do you think about, like, da font? So there's a series of questions here. Get into it. Have a unique point of view. This is about you guys expressing your opinion. I'm not going to chastise you if we disagree, right? This is about you guys formulating an opinion and then feeling confident in that decision. And I think that's important. So 2 different points of view. I think this will be a good one for you guys. It's one of my favorites, and it in the past has performed well. Okay, any questions about that before I move on to demo? No?
This is a random illustrator question.
Yeah.
So if we have a spread, do we make just an artboard that's twice the size of a portrait?
Oh, Margaret, you would ask this question. So there's a few ways to approach it. I always look at our work in preview. And when I get into the type specimens, I don't go to the single page, I go to the double page view.
Okay.
Where you always have the first page is always the cover, and then subsequent pages are spreads, right? As long as it's set up in such a way that that's appropriate. So you can actually just have separate artboards. You don't need to do one artboard for 2 different pages. I have had students do that in the past. Now, where this gets easier is if you're using InDesign. So I don't teach InDesign in this class. If you take Voice of Type with me, and I hope you guys will, because you're lovely people, I will teach InDesign in that class. But I start with Illustrator because it's, I think, the most basic, the easiest one to learn in, and InDesign is, it's a beast.
So if you don't have a preference about whatever we
If you want to do work in InDesign, I'm fine with that. I will always run demos in Illustrator. The exception is when I get into typesetting with paragraph copy. That is the one where I will mention what it is in InDesign because it is slightly different between the 2 programs, the nomenclature.
Okay. I thought you just wanted to teach. I'm very familiar with InDesign, so I would just say not as familiar with Illustrator.
Yeah, if InDesign is more comfortable for you. And to be totally honest, with book design, it is actually more appropriate to use InDesign. So I'm fine with that if you're comfortable. I just won't be demoing that. So I think, if you're going to be, if you're not familiar with these tools, Illustrator is probably the better tool for you.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I can just set up artboards and mess with it and export until it does what it needs to do in preview.
That sounds like a good idea.
Okay. Because I didn't know how, I was looking at the examples, and I didn't know how they made it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always a little tricky.
Can we do any small amounts of Photoshop, like Phototouch?
You can. So Photoshop is allowed. I don't want you using lots of Photoshop. Like if you use and I will know. It'll be like the first thing I ask because I'll be like, did you use Photoshop? And almost always the answer is yes because it's crunchy, it's pixelated, the file size is too big, like it looks like shit, I can't zoom in. So if you're going to use Photoshop, do it at 300 DPI. Do it at the size of your page, right? Use proper cross-program techniques. When you're doing type, not type like for image, type, it is more appropriate to use a vector rendering program, which is why we do Illustrator.
Right. I didn't know if it was just not allowed, like images. It would just be for like images and maybe
Oh, I expect you to use
like with
Photoshop
shapes,
for
like
images.
I don't know.
I'll be teaching you. I can possibly teach you tonight how to mask too in Illustrator. There are ways to mask.
Yeah,
And you
or
can,
those sort of shapes. If you added mask a rectangle.
yeah, you can do that. You can also mask type. You can do. There's something called a gradient mask. There's a lot of different masking techniques in Illustrator that are a little bit tricky to find, but once you find them, sometimes it is easier to run that thing in Illustrator than it would be in Photoshop. So. Any other questions?
Are we printing?
No, but
Oh.
okay. So here's the
Can
deal. Yes, you can absolutely print. I don't teach the printing techniques because printing is frowned upon at my own lab. So
That's crazy.
don't even get me started. So I've complained about it every quarter. Nothing changes. So just know that if you print stuff, like I will be fucking elated. I've actually had one student in the past who he was doing a magazine project for me, and he was doing a gatefold, which is like where part of the page folds out. And like I was like, I don't think you have this set up right. And I was like, if you want to do that, you have to actually do a printed demo for a printed maquette for me, which is a small version of it. So he brought in the printed version.
Cool.
So, and if you guys want to print, like I'm fine with that. Like I will never chastise you guys for printing. That,
Everything. You get a print package design. So coming here and not doing that, like everyone's like,
It's-
print's dead.
no,
like,
print's
it's so
not dead.
cool. I'm like, no, print's like you print something out 15 times, fuck it up, you can learn something, and then the
Yeah.
final piece, you're like, yeah.
yeah. No, I would love to run every critique with like prints on a wall and a red pen. That would be my.
What's their reasoning? Is it digital or is it just because the cost effective?
I think it's cost. Yeah,
that they don't want to supply the printing.
it's expensive,
Yeah.
and they don't want you
Yeah,
guys to spend all that money on a printer outside the school. So, I would encourage printing. I think if you guys want to print, I would be happy to examine prints. But keep in mind, you're not required to. I would never require you to. But, I'm a daughter of a paper salesman, so I grew up with, like, beautiful papers around me at all given times, like gold fleck paper and linen paper and, like, paper that you couldn't rip paper. Like, I grew up with amazing paper, so, like, I am incredibly sensitive to printed. But I do not teach printing techniques in this class. So if you set your file up as RGB, I won't have a problem with it. And actually, if you're going to run it on like an iGen or some sort of digital process printer, RGB is like kind of an okay way to set it.
Right.
So, any questions? Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay, let's get into demo. So, I'm going to go through, huh?
They changed the Illustrator.
Yeah, this is the Creative Cloud 2014, yeah.
They
It's
have
gonna.
little like games too. You probably turn them off, but they have little like tutorials.
Oh, yeah, I turned those off.
Oh, is that what it is that pops up?
Oh,
Yeah, I just.
this is not good. Alright, so font case. I need to turn on some fonts. Turn on Minion. What else do I need to turn on? Okay. Apologies for that, guys. So here I've gone ahead and I've set up some artboards with some different demos for you. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up my type palette. So I'm going to do my character palette, and I'm going to just swing that over here so that it takes up the second column. And I'm going to do my paragraph palette, my open type palette, and I think everything else is kind of okay for now. I might just put my line palette down here. It's worth it to set things up just so before you get started. Sometimes it makes life a little bit easier. So here I'm going to go into optical sizes, and I'm going to go to view, fit in window, just No, that's not what I wanted. The artboard and window. There we go. So here you can see I have the optical sizes for Minion. So Minion has 4 different optical sizes: display, subhead, regular, and then caption. So if I was to select this up here, you can see that in my font menu for the styles and weights, you can see that there's a caption optical size. Now there's also an italic caption and a medium caption. So if I went to medium caption, right, which is a different weight, you can see how it differs. So like, let's say if I did medium caption there and I did medium regular, medium subhead, and medium display, you can see that you still get, there we go, variation in weight, right? But it's really about the sizing. So caption here is way too big, right? Like caption should be like no more than like, you know, like 9 points, and it actually could probably be like 8 points. And that would be like an appropriate size for caption, right? Does that make more sense now, optical sizing? I didn't
realize that it was a selection under your drop down, because none of mine, I don't think I have any typefaces that have that as an option.
Yeah, so there's a typefaces folder I think I gave you week 1. That should have at least a few. And Minion's actually, if you have Creative Cloud, if you have Adobe stuff installed, I think Minion actually comes along with that. So that would be a good typeface to play with that. And it's a beautiful typeface. So here is just some copy set out in Minion. So I've got, you know, an extra small piece of copy here with the name. I've got big copy here. I've got like a subhead. And then I've got like body copy, right? So here, if I just take this, I can see that this is all set in regular. But really, you know, maybe I want to set this in display, right? So immediately it makes it look a little bit more refined. Maybe I want to set this in subhead, right? And then let's say I want to actually set this in caption, right? Because this is a little bit smaller. And this I'm going to keep it regular. You can see that it starts to look a little bit more proportional, right? Now, if I really wanted to, you know, make it look extra beautiful.
What is that?
Yeah, what's that thing?
Why is it?
Oh, so this is threaded text. So threaded text, if you have text that is too long for a text box, it will give you a little plus sign. So
Yeah,
see that?
I know that. What's the blue line?
The blue line is the connection. It shows you what text box
So if you have that much stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, so if you pressed, for those of you who don't know, you can, see, that's not what I wanted to do. You can press that little red plus there, and it gives you a little icon, and you can drag out, and it would continue that. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So you just hold down the red guy and then drag it?
Nope, you just click once, and it'll give you like a little icon there. You can see the icon. I don't know if it'll... Yeah, or you can just click in it, exactly.
I've just never seen that blue line before.
Yeah, I've seen the red plus sign a couple of times. I mean, here and there, but never seen I've never actually seen that to something else.
Yeah.
It's just,
I don't know. So that is optical sizing in a nutshell, right? Now, you can do things with optical sizing roughly if you have many, many different types of weights. So like if I was to do this article, which is all in Helvetica New, I could do that as ultralight. I could do this as light or maybe thin. And maybe that I leave, but maybe this all becomes, you know, light. And you can see there that I start to create something that feels like all the weights are slightly more proportional. So that's another option. It's not the same as optical sizing, okay? But it gives you sort of similar results, right? Now when it comes to leading, right? You can see here how I have, you know, the leading here. Let's say I'm going to put it at auto. that's pretty tight letting, right? If I start to push that letting out just a little bit, look at how much lighter the composition is, right? It gives it just something that's a little bit more elegant. Now, if I had maybe set all of this in, let's say I set this in Knockout. I don't know if that's really a good typeface pairing here. Ooh, that's like a little bit too narrow. Let's do that in all caps. Now, if I have this, you can see that the leading is actually a little bit too tall here, right? So a good, example of this would be you maybe want to pull this leading in just so slightly so that you get much more narrow lines. Now, obviously, like I could break this a little bit better so that the line breaks sort of work for this, and maybe I don't want that shape, so I might play with this a bit. But you get an idea of how the leading should work across different headlines. So leading is a really important element in design. It affects the overall color of a composition, whether it's dark and dense or light and airy. So those are all things that you can play with. Now, kerning. Kerning is a bitch. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. This is kerning. So I'm actually going to turn on, what's it called? Mouse Jose. So you guys can actually see my keyboard keystrokes. So here I have, this is Scala. It's a typeface called Scala. And I have the kerning suppressed. So if I look over here in this menu, this is tracking, this is leading. So it sets the spacing between two lines of type. This here is tracking, okay? And if you hover over, it'll say set the tracking for characters. And tracking, really, if I put the tracking up, you can see how all of the letters get slightly farther apart from one another. I could also go with negative tracking, and you can see how they all start to touch awkwardly. Sometimes this is the effect you want, not usually. And then there's kerning. Now, kerning, you can see over here, is just the space between two letters, or two characters, or two glyphs. Now, kerning is usually set to auto, but if I actually set the kerning to 0, that suppresses the kerning completely, which means no kerning pairs are used. Now, you can see here, if I selected auto, first of all, let's establish that there's an awkward gap there, right? That looks sort of weird. It's a little bit too far apart. If I set the kerning to auto, you can see that it still doesn't fix this gap. So clearly there's an issue with this typeface, even though it is actually a very well-designed typeface, and I need to fix the kerning. Now, the way that you do that is you place your cursor, your blinking cursor, between the two letters that you want to kern. There are two methods to do this. The first is you can actually use the arrow keys over here to reduce the kerning, and you can see that it's slowly inching back and forth. I prefer not to do this, and now I'm going to have to remember what my kerning hotkey is. Yes, it's Alt and then the arrow key. So you can arrow key out, you can arrow key in, and you can see that, that actually looks, a lot better. I can go back and forth there. There's a little bit too much space over there as well, so I might pull that in. And you can see how that starts to look a lot better. Over here, you can see where we've got a lot of capital letters here. These are some of the worst capital letters to work with because they sort of taper or they have these awkward blank spaces within them. So here I've got the kerning suppressed. Now if you turn the kerning on auto, you can see how the Y and the T come together. So clearly that kerning pair works. But, a lot of these other ones, like this A and the P together, that's something that I would probably want to kern in a bit. Okay? And then down here for rub, we can see that I have the kerning at auto. If I turn it off completely, you can see that I still get the same result. And the space between the U and V is a bit too much, so I might just pull it in. Okay?
So is that option?
Option or Alt, and then the right or left arrow keys will turn in and out. So you can really actually do pretty quick kerning just using those arrow keys. Yep.
Is that automatic or do you have to be selected?
You don't have to, nope, you don't have to select anything. If you just put your cursor between two things and then you do Alt or Option, right or left arrow key, it'll automatically do it for you. Nothing needs to be turned on. As long as you're in the text, it'll do it, which is great.
If you highlight all the text, do that. Is that tracking?
Yeah, well, okay. So please don't do that. Because
Okay.
just because, you know, you're calling it tracking doesn't mean it's actually tracking. Okay? So tracking, when you track something out, it takes into account the built-in kerning pairs in the typeface. So if you use kerning to do all of your tracking,
You don't need to do tracking.
you should, first of all, never do that, because I will always bitch about your kerning. That's like the first thing that I look at, and especially like as you get better with type. Like if you get really good by the end of this class, and you guys will all be amazing, I think. I will probably complain about kerning like every class to you. So just know that if you do that as your tracking tool, you're setting yourself up for a world of hurt, because I'm going to be nitpicking and nitpicking, and you're going to be like, why isn't this fixing?
If we're using kerning as our tracking tool, is that what you just said?
Yeah, don't do that.
Right.
Ever.
Okay, but I meant like, so I was saying if you highlight a whole word and do the same all over, does that do tracking for that? Or you're just saying, forget even doing that?
Oh, I see what you're saying. So if you were to highlight and then you did, yes. So if you highlight everything, that will track. Sorry, I did not understand your question.
I didn't mean
It was a really good question.
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to track by using kerning. I didn't mean that.
Okay,
I just
cool.
meant that, yeah.
I got it. So one other quick tip: if you have type selected and you do Alt down arrow or up arrow, that will increase the leading by 2 points. Okay. Just make sure I'm covering everything here. Yes, got that. Now, any text that you set in all caps will almost always require some kerning. Text, unless it's a typeface designed to be in all caps, which most typefaces are not. There are some novelty typefaces that are. You will almost always need to do some kerning. So you can see here between the O and the V, I will need to kern that in slightly. You should always do your leading and your tracking before you kern anything. Kern last. Yeah. Definitely always kern last. So this, you might want to move your lower and uppercase letters together. Those tend to be pairs that you can sort of adjust like a little bit here and there. This actually is kind of okay, although I think the O and the L could move a little bit closer together. So those are always areas that you want to look out for. The other area you want to look out for is numbers. People always forget to kern their numbers. So here, if I look at 1991, there's a lot more space between the ones and the nines and the 2 nines together. So ones are like a little bit of a bitch, so you just want to kern those in a little bit. Ooh, wrong way. Right? And then, periods with like 7s and sometimes 6s and other characters like that, you just want to kern those in a bit so it looks even, okay? Any questions so far? No. Okay, awesome. Now, when you have ligatures turned on, you want to watch out with your kerning, because if you look at, even though like I can, these are 3 different letters, it's one character in Illustrator, okay? So for example, if I decide that I want to like kern this in and then like kern that in and everything like that, it's like maybe not going to work so well. Also, like watch out for your tracking. So you can see that as I track this out, it doesn't really, track the ligatures out. It's not like the ligatures like, ooh, they stretch out, right? They don't do that. So when you're working with ligatures, just keep that in mind. You know, and also like too, like if you wanted to go like really like in deep because you decided that you want to be like uber postmodern, Herb Lugalin, modern-ish, like please don't do this every class, guys. Like it's also not going to work for that. Now, where kerning is sort of helpful and you don't really think of it as something that you would need to do is when you're working with script typefaces. So last night when I was prepping for this demo, I was like looking through all of my script typefaces, and I think I've actually managed to weed out at this point in my career all of the shitty script typefaces. So it was really, I had a very hard time finding a script typeface that had like a shitty connection in it because I just don't do those anymore. So I don't buy bad typefaces. I buy really good typefaces. So I did find one though. This is a beautiful typeface called Bombshell Pro, and you can find it on the interwebs for pirates. But here you can see where there's like a gap between those two letters. And if I wanted to, and I don't know that this is necessarily an issue with this, but it was the only thing I could find, I could, you know, kern this in just slightly so that I get that connection point. This doesn't always work, by the way. Sometimes you actually have to manually sketch that in, and that's okay too.
Does any of this deal with widows and orphans?
That's next week. And that's great questions. Yeah, because that's...
So is incident
that would
an
be
orphan or widow?
Okay, so when it comes to widows and orphans, I've like read multiple texts. Like I left books, and one of the types of books I collect are design books. So like when I build classes and class material for you guys, I'm actually referencing fucking books, not always just the internet. So I have read many texts by many scholars, and I can tell you that no one agrees what a widow is and what an orphan is.
So it's either or.
You can use them interchangeably. So the difference is, and no one can tell you which is which, a widow or an orphan is either one word if you have like a paragraph of type, it's one word at the next line, right? So if you have, like this would technically be considered an orphan, or a widow, depending on who you're talking to. Although, it's not like a huge offender. Like it would be a huge offender if it was like the word it. That would be like a dick move typographically, okay? Don't do that. You're just being an asshole. You're making that one little word very lonely, okay? Now, the other definition for widow or orphan, or depending on who you're talking to, is if you have two columns of type and you have the end of a paragraph goes to the last line of the paragraph, or like the last word of a paragraph ends up in the next column. So I'll show you an example of that next week. That's like another like kind of a dick move. So like just key with typographers, don't be a dick, right? So let's see here on this example, and I'm trying to remember what the point I had for this was. I can't remember. So maybe it was just that this is like poorly kerned type. So here you can see that there's a lot of kerning I need to do. And when you're dealing with serifs are one of the harder typefaces to kern. Sans serifs, they don't have like those little like things that stick out, right? So you can be a little bit more liberal with them. With serifs, though, you actually have to worry about them things colliding into one another. And like here's an instance where this sort of one thing turns into another, right? So if I was to turn on ligatures for this, you could see that those two F's sort of go right into one another, and I don't know if the B sort of still is its own character. And I'm wondering if it turned on discretionary. Oh no, discretionary just turns on swirls. So that is the swirl setting. So, but you can still see that, like, even though I've turned on ligatures, like, I still need to, like, go through and, like, manually kern this to, like, match what I've just been given, and then, like, I deal with, like, these colliding letter forms. So keep in mind that, like, there are certain typefaces that are just going to be harder to kern than others. And, you know, that makes life hard, right? Now, when you're kerning, it's recommended that you kern 3 letters at a time. So if you have like the word bacon, let's kern the word bacon. Bacon is always a good idea. And I'm going to do Alt. Nope, that was not the letter. Nope. Where's my hotkey? There we go. Command Shift and then open caret or close caret will make your typeface larger.
How do you get it to make it larger with the text box? Whenever I do that, or do you just not have that highlighted within the text box?
Well, you can still do it. So I just have the text box selected. Yeah. So there's bacon, and I'm going to put it in Helvetica bold because that's usually a good thing to kern with. And so if I was going to kern bacon, I would want to kern these 3 letters first. So I would want to, pull my A in, I want to pull my C in, and then I want to look at the ACO. So I think the O actually, I feel like, yeah, I could, do I want to bring it in? Yeah. I could maybe bring it in. And then we've got the N. So it would do CON, right? So if you kern in groups of 3, you'll usually end up with something that's kind of okay. And like looking at this, I might want to bring that in a little bit more and that in one more. And I think that's fairly well kerned. The other way to check your kerning is to flip it upside down. If it still looks good upside down, you've done your job.
Do you look at like the O and the N and O right now? Would you reference that to the A and the B? Would you try to piece it more?
I usually go 3 letters and then I move on. I drop the first letter and I go to the next 3 letters. And then at the end of it, as you saw, I got to the end, and then I went back to the beginning just to see if it was there's anything that was off still, and I made a couple of tweaks. Then I flipped it upside down to make sure it still looks good. It's still, I think that's actually fairly well kerned. I feel like the A and the C pair there, I might be able to tweak a little bit, but other than that, it looks kind of, and I feel like I could go back and forth all day on that one, and it would still look a little strange, and that's sort of how kerning is sometimes. So, does that make sense for you guys? Only kern headlines, big type. I am not expecting you to kern body type. There's too much other stuff you should be doing to body type, and it's too hard. So there's no point. Any questions? All right, that's all for today. If you guys have questions, you can email me.